we do acknowledge that younger widows have different needs compared to older widows. So for example, younger widows talk about things like, I'm lonely, it would be great if I can have a husband, something, especially if you're a widow and you're 30 years old. And
you can encourage them to remarry.
Exactly, and that now is the big question, because in many cultures, not only in the Luo culture but across Africa, remarriage for widows is not a clear option, because it comes with different risks for the widows. I've had somebody use this term that widows are not socially desirable for marriage, in the sense that if you're a young widow with the 3 sons, think of even our Kenyan context, and the man who wants to welcome these 3 sons as his own and treat them truly as his own is not an easy thing. And then on the other side of the scale, it's sort of like, in some of the cultures, for example in the Luo culture, once a man pays dowry, the contract there is sort of like the children belong to the husband's family. And so sometimes when you as a widow say, I have needs as a woman, I want to continue building my life with a new partner, then it becomes a question of, do you have actually the freedom or the right to have your children with you, or the aunts, the relatives, the brothers-in-law, you're going to have like a tug of war over the children. So that's one thing they face. And you might think that maybe culture had a solution for it, in the sense that in Luo culture, now I don't know about other cultures, but across other places in Africa too, the practice of, it's called wife inheritance or widow inheritance. It's common, it's still there. And so one might think that that could be, sort of a solution for the remarriage question.
Is it still happening?
It's still happening, and it's so there are several things going on. So one, the practice itself has changed over time, in the sense that we don't live in the same political structures that we had pre-colonial times, when probably wife inheritance was not something that would demean a widow. I've had people talk about things, at least for the Luo culture, that the widow had a right over so many things, even a right over whether I would have a man as an inheritor or a husband, in that particular sense. Right now, that doesn't seem to be, sort of a respected right. You find younger widows will tell you things like, I was so pressured by, my father-in-law, my brothers-in-law, that I needed to have, a man. So there's that changes in our society, and it comes with, modernism and all of these things, that, even a practice that might have been designed properly for the, socioeconomic protection of a widow in those times doesn't function in that particular way it was designed in this modern culture. And so you have that as a problem. The second thing, especially around the Lake Victoria region, is HIV. So the HIV prevalence is so high, and with that, there's men who could have been the ones who are directly responsible of the socioeconomic protection of the widow, going like, I don't want that responsibility, because right now in the minds of people, sex is required, with that contract of whoever is your widow inheritor. And for the widows we serve, actually around the Lake Victoria region, and this is data from research, more than 60% of women who are HIV positive are widows.
Oh, is that so?
Yes, and this is a study that was actually done, I think it was Bondo district. It's a high percentage, and even among the widows we serve, like 1 in 5 of them is infected. And I'm a researcher, so I look for what can we learn here that can eventually also probably inform some of our government policies and things like that. And you find that 1 in 5 of them is infected, and many of them, probably more than 70% of them, discover their HIV status 2 years or 3 years after their husband died. Yeah, and so you link it more to the practice of widow inheritance.
So, and there's something you said about if you're not having sex in that culture, then you're considered unclean.
So that's sort of like, there's a process of things. When your husband dies, you're considered unclean. Oh, okay. There is no, as a widow, there's nothing similar for men. Like if your wife dies, there's nothing, it's just for women. And so So to be clean, the practice for that is called sexual cleansing. So you need to sleep with a relative or an in-law to be clean.
So that's one of the reasons.
That's one of the reasons. Yeah. And actually for older widows, most of them, if they end up acquiring HIV after their husband died, that's usually the time. And part of why that's the reason is because, as I told you, things have changed. Men who should have been taking the responsibility of protection no longer are interested in. And now we have a crop of men. I've read a research paper describing them professional widow inheritors. And that's all they do. From one home to another. Seriously. And when you're doing sexual cleansing, somebody, whoever, has decided you're not supposed to use condom. That, sort of...
it's been decided.
It's been decided. So you won't even have, as much, I don't know, like, ability. So obviously, oftentimes we talk about women not having the ability to negotiate safe sex in a lot of relationships. But in this one also, as a culture, it's already decided that you're not supposed to be using. So all of these things, if you look at them, it makes widowhood itself for a woman a risk for HIV.
As a woman, how do you inherit land as a widow? I'm sure back then they never used to acknowledge that. I don't know right now, because it's already in the constitution. Have they embraced that law?
It's still a law on paper. The implementation, I think that there's a way in which culture is changing slowly. So I think there are people who are respecting that, but still the majority are not yet. And I think it also combines just with the lack of knowledge of even what are those laws and how are they designed, who are they protecting, and why. So for the many widows, we held a property rights training for widows just in December last year with Transparency International. So they sent us some lawyers who took us through that training. And of the widows who came, I think 80% of them had like a issue that they wanted, a professional legal counsel over. And that meant they're already facing some, land conflicts with people. And for some of them, like one of them was just like, some people all over came to my home and they told me this is their property they've bought. And I'm like, this is my home, this is where I live. How? And now she's in a legal battle with, She's a widow. Yeah. Some of them were sort of just saying, sometimes it's just like, somebody has sold your property and we don't know who, and somebody has come and they have papers and they're claiming that's their property. Yeah. Sometimes it's also just your relatives who are coming in. They keep telling you, for one of the widows, a story was like, they keep telling you, oh, you need to share this piece of land with, so-and-so, and then you share, and then you need to share it again. And so it's like, are you going to share until you don't have a place for yourself? So to answer your question, the law is there, but we need to raise more awareness of the law, and also, and sensitization around it. We're talking about what are we doing on the leadership area. I've been working on a curriculum called Voice of Change, and it takes the stories of widows in the Bible as mirror stories that these widows can use to easily enter into their own, stories that can be had. So if you look at those stories of widows in the Bible, you'll find they're not so different from, what widows
they're going through.
Exactly what widows.
So, okay, what can you say is the biggest challenge, for lack of a better word, that they go through, or a widow goes through specifically? Yeah,
it's different things. It's different things, and remember, because widows are not all the same. And that's why for us, we just love it that they put their group together and come with all their different backgrounds together, because that way there's different things. Remember the question, what do you want to give, what do you want to receive? Yeah. Each person is going to come into that small group with different needs and different strengths. And so we want them to just come together like that so that they're able to support each other. Yeah. But younger widows deal a lot with loneliness, and, some wanting to have like a sexual partner, and feeling like I just don't see the straight avenues for me to do that. Older widows, they'll tell you things like, I have sons and daughters-in-law doing those things. I'm not interested in having like a sexual...
But you actually feel like older, okay, not like 87.
Yeah.
Well,
from the 50s to the 60s. Perhaps maybe they're just hiding in their age.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah? That's also something that, you know, I've had people also say that it's truly a possibility.
Yeah.
Like somebody can just say, you know, I am not interested at all, but somebody can also just say, you know, I'm shy, I have daughters-in-law, and so I don't feel like I also want to be seen as having like a you know, a sexual partner.
What's your parting shot on, I mean, women, or what you feel that woman can do or a woman can do to encourage another person, especially you, that in fact that you deal with widows? It's not something that many women out there are doing. Just encourage a widow out there.
I think, yeah, so for the widows out there, I think the first thing I want to say, God really loves you. In the process of creating the curriculum for Voice of Change, I think I've been amazed at how widows are at the heart of God. And he talks a lot about the different oppressions they experience. And you even see in those stories God passing on judgment to people who have subjected widows to certain kinds of injustices, which just shows the extent to which he cares. So I would tell, you know, the widow out there, maybe you're frustrated, maybe your land is being taken away, maybe, you know, you are young and you want to remarry and you feel like there are no options. Just first, you know that God loves you. And then the second thing, in your community where you are, I would encourage widows to come together in similar leadership circles or support groups as we've done with the group I was telling you. Like I said, a lot has happened by just those women coming together and seeing that they actually have a lot of power, and even their little resources can be so meaningful when they think together on how to use it for their benefits, because you have to really know what, you know, you could say what you're being called to do, because for me that's how I felt this was. And so whatever you're passionate about or whatever you actually feel deeply being called to do, just take the first steps of having a conversation. It always starts with a conversation, and then listening to the people you want to serve, and then seeing what's next after that conversation.
All right. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Thank you for all that information, and thank you, of course, for what you are doing. You're really making a difference in the society.